Hello, and welcome to the International News Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Dunicic. Before we begin our special report today, I want to remind you to subscribe to our channel to stay in the loop on the global affairs that are occurring today. So let's get right into it. Today we're going to be reporting on what I personally consider to be the most criminally underreported and understated global affair that is occurring today. I'm talking about an issue that has led to the deaths of tens of thousands of people, where war crimes have occurred, where alleged ethnic cleansing has occurred, and where countless of innocent people and civilians are dying. I'm talking about a conflict in which the line between soldier and civilian is beginning to be more and more blurred, and innocent people are losing their lives every day. In addition to this, they are being forced to live with a lack of basic humanitarian necessities. Of course, I'm talking about the Tigray War, which is occurring in the current borders of Ethiopia. Now, to even begin to understand this conflict, one needs to understand Ethiopia itself. Ethiopia is one federal republic and one federal nation or country. That being said, it is a country that is made up of many different regions. Each of these regions has significant differences, being linguistic, ethnic, and religious. These differences have led to conflict and tensions in the past. Ethiopia has attempted to unify despite these differences and to build one functioning federal republic. Recently, these attempts have led to the current conflict occurring in Tigray. More specifically, what would begin this conflict is current Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed intending to take his political party and all of the different political parties from each of Ethiopia's regions and other opposition parties and put them all together under one, what he would call, prosperity party. This was an attempt, as Ahmed claims, to unite Ethiopia, to lessen nationalistic differences, and to ensure federal stability and peace. Nonetheless, this would not go over well with each and every single one of Ethiopia's regions. More specifically, the Tigrayan region and its leadership would have an issue with this. The TPLF, or the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, which is the major political party in the Tigrayan region, was completely opposed to this, stating that it was an attempt to unify Ethiopia under a one-party system. Now, it should be noted that the TPLF is kind of being hypocritical here. If you look back into the history of Ethiopia, and for me to completely go back into the history of Ethiopia, I'm not going to be able to do that today simply because we don't have the time. But the TPLF itself, the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, ruled Ethiopia and was the predominant political party, the de facto one party that ruled the state for 27 years. And these 27 years were not exactly democratic, peaceful, and nice. This government was oppressive, it was brutal, and it left a lot of bad blood between the TPLF and many of Ethiopia's citizens. Now, Abiy Ahmed's attempt to unify Ethiopia under one political party, as mentioned before, would not be accepted by the TPLF. More specifically, its chairperson, Demetrius Geber Michael, who has stated that this is an attempt to institute an undemocratic government. It would not help that Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed would take the scheduled Ethiopian elections, which were to occur in September of 2020, and reschedule them, postpone them by an entire year, stating the coronavirus pandemic as an epidemiological concern. literally taking the scheduled democratic elections and postponing them by a year. This was the tipping point for the TPLF. And many other things would happen in the meantime, and I am skipping over some minor details here, such as Abiy Ahmed's attempt and successful attempt to create a more comfortable relationship with the neighboring country of Eritrea. Eritrea used to be a former region of Ethiopia itself. Now, I cannot go into all of this again because the history is so complicated and complex, and it would simply take too much time. But tensions between the TPLF in Tigray and the federal Ethiopian government, led by Abiy Ahmed, would grow and grow and grow. The TPLF decided to, despite Ahmed and his government's postponement of elections, which were to be in September 2020, hold them nonetheless. Tigray would hold regional elections, which would re-elect Demetrius Gebremichael as the chairperson of the TPLF and re-put that political power in control of that region. Abiy Ahmed would state that these elections were not legitimate and that the Tigrayan government was attempting to secede and attempting to create a constitutional crisis in Ethiopia. Now, while we mention the constitution, it should be mentioned that the Ethiopian constitution does allow any nation, region, or people in Ethiopia to have the right to self-determination and even secession. And that is what the TPLF and the Tigrayan government has stated that its right is to do. They have not stated that they want to specifically secede or not be a part of Ethiopia anymore. However, they are currently self-determining that they want to have their own democratically elected regional government, which would be independent of Abiy Ahmed's government. The Constitution also allows for any actor, nationality, or group that is creating instability that could ruin the fundamental federal basis of Ethiopia and its constitution for the federal government to intervene and prevent these acts. Now, keep in mind, it may look like the TPLF was just attempting to have its own democratically elected region. However, many people in Ethiopia felt that this was not the case, simply based on the history of its former political rule and its former political dominance. And on the other side, many people feel that the leaders in Tigray, which are the TPLF, are simply trying to have more regional control because they do no longer have control over the federal government. That it's simply a grab for power. Tensions would begin to grow even more. Eritrean forces, which actually chose to ally on the side of the Ethiopian government, led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, would begin to go onto the borders of Tigray, alongside with the Ethiopian National Defense Forces soldiers, which were also supported by Ethiopia's police. The Tigrayan TPLF would respond to this by instituting a preemptive attack on midnight between November 3rd and November 4th on Ethiopian headquarters, Ethiopian national and federal military headquarters and bases in the Tigrayan region. The Ethiopian National Defense Force, the Federal Defense Force, would react immediately. The war would begin on midnight between November 3rd and November 4th. Within 26 days, the Tigrayan TPLF government was completely overthrown, with the ENDF and the federal government overtaking the Tigrayan capital of Mekelle. And it seemed like the war was over. And Abiy Ahmed, the prime minister, stated, the crisis in Tigray is over and it's taken care of. However, the TPLF, led by Gebremichael, would state that it would continue to fight until the invaders. And it's important that they use the quote, invaders, because even though the TPLF has stated that they do not intend to secede with Tigray out of Ethiopia, using the term invaders is a very political word that implies that a foreign country is inside your soil. And this can also be stated that there were Eritrean soldiers, which is a foreign nation, inside the Tigrayan region, that they would continue to fight until these invaders were pushed out of the region. and this seemed highly unlikely. However, the TPLF still managed to gain support amongst different rebel groups, amongst different people in Tigray, and actual soldiers of the ENDF, Ethiopia's federal military, would defect and join the TPLF cause under the Tigrayan Defense Force, the TDF. The TDF would, after a period of a few months, retake Mekelle and very swiftly retake the vast majority of its former Tigrayan territory. Today, the TDF under the TPLF controls almost 99% of the territory in Tigray. It's hard to specifically say how much territory is covered. There has not been a lot of reporting on this issue. In addition, many different sources and government officials are not being truthful with their statements. So this is an estimate. However, it can be safely stated that the TDF and the TPLF maintain the vast majority of control of the Tigrayan region. Now, the problem is that this has also spilled over to neighboring regions in Ethiopia, with the TDF attacking its neighboring regions which it stated that it had no interest in taking over. The TDF has stated that the reason it's doing this is to put pressure on the Ethiopian federal government, specifically Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, to lift a blockade which has been imposed upon Tigray. And as you'll be able to see on the map here, Tigray is a region in Ethiopia that is completely blocked off by enemy forces. Eritrea is to the north, and Ethiopia completely surrounds it. A blockade has been instituted on Tigray, which has prevented millions of people living inside the region to gain access to even basic humanitarian things, such as telecommunications, banking services, humanitarian aid, food, water, and different things that are needed to live the most basic human life, needed to simply survive. And the TDF has insisted that its attacks on the neighboring regions, which it has no intention of taking over, allegedly, have only been to lift this blockade, which is inconsistent with some of the statements that have came from the TPLF, stating that they have began to form a coalition of different rebel groups to overthrow the democratically unelected government of Abiy Ahmed. Basically, there is a stalemate. The TDF controls most of Tigray, and the conflict is beginning to spill over into the rest of Ethiopia. The ENDF has shown that it does not have the ability to retake Tigray and is simply fighting back the TDF. It's actually shown that it's desperate. The federal government has made statements that all civilians, no matter what their age, should do everything they can to stop the TDF in its tracks. This show of desperation shows that the conflict is not going to end soon, which is highly problematic. No matter whose side you're on here, and it's really, really difficult to take a side when both are pretty shitty, let's be completely honest. On one hand, you have a former political party that used to rule Ethiopia with an iron fist, attempting to secede. Whether this is because of their democratic right or right to self-determination, it could just be a power grab by the politicians that are in charge of this region. And on the other hand, you have Abiy Ahmed, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, who postponed elections, which traditionally is not something you should do in any democratic or functional society. In addition to this, the TPLF leadership, the Tigrayan side, has stated that it is willing to meet for peace talks. However, these have been denied and completely overthrown to the side by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. So there have been attempts at peace. Though on Ahmed's side, he has stated that these were just attempts by the TDF to distract the Ethiopian military, the federal military, so that the Tigrayan Defense Forces could have military gains. Now, this conflict is not just one that is strategic or military-based or political. It is one that has affected thousands of innocent people. Maybe no conflict in recent history has it occurred as much as it has in this one, where the line between civilian and soldier has been so blurred. War crimes are being committed on a regular basis. Innocent civilians are dying. And these crimes have been committed by both sides, the TDF and the ENDF. Children have been killed. Women have been killed. Non-combatants have frequently been killed. And what I'm about to say is pretty dark here, and if you don't want to hear it, I would recommend that you tune out. The act of war rape has become a daily occurrence, with women as young as 8 years old or as old as 72 years old frequently being raped by both sides, sometimes in front of their family members. These are real people living an actual hell, a nightmare. If this conflict doesn't end, not only is there a humanitarian crisis on one end, where millions of people lack the basic necessities to survive, there are two forces that are enraged at one another, that are committing war crimes against the civilians of each other's side. This is a conflict that needs to come to an end, and it needs to come to an end now. It should have came to an end a long time ago. This conflict has only been occurring for 10 months. The African Union, which is the largest bloc in Africa, containing 55 member states within Africa, has attempted to institute peace talks between both sides. However, these peace talks have not even began to start, or have just been thrown off by one side or the other. Recently, the United States and the United Nations have begun to put pressure on both sides to sit down and at least create a ceasefire. However, it doesn't seem that peace is going to happen anytime soon. The TDF and TPLF, led by Gabriel Michael, has stated that it wants to overthrow Abiy Ahmed. Abiy Ahmed has designated the TPLF and its leader as a terrorist organization and a terrorist leader. This designation is not going to change until a new federal government is formed in Ethiopia following October 3rd of this year. Hopefully after this date, whatever government is formed, whether it's under Ahmed or whether it's under someone else, it is going to be willing to sit down and have peace talks. This is a major humanitarian crisis. People, innocent people, non-combatants are dying every day. And they're not just dying. They're living through daily hells like starvation, rape, and inaccess to water or medical care. These people are suffering, and their suffering needs to come to an end. Comment what you think. Comment how you think the situation is going to develop. Comment who you think is at fault. Let's begin a discussion here. I'm just happy to report on this issue because, as I mentioned before, it has been criminally underreported on. And it is important that the entire world knows what is happening to the people in this region. Why has this issue not been reported on? Some people will say other more important media events have been occurring, such as the pullout of Afghanistan and the formation of a new Taliban government, or the fact that we've been in a fucking pandemic for the last 2 years. COVID-19 has been the main media source for the last 2 years, and maybe this conflict has gone ignored because of that. Or maybe simply Western media sources don't give a shit about Africa and Black people. Whatever your thoughts are, let me know. And I'm just glad that you were able to hear about this issue today. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of the International News Daily Podcast.